Something doesn't add up at Red Bull, and the paddock can feel it, because just days after one of their worst weekends in recent memory, right when everyone thought they were down, something changed. Quietly, almost too quietly. And now, heading into Japan, Red Bull isn't panicking. They're promising something else entirely, a comeback. But here's the twist. This isn't just about fixing a car. This is about sending a message to Mercedes, to Ferrari, to everyone. And it starts in China, where everything began to fall apart. The RB22 didn't just struggle, it collapsed under pressure. Max Verstappen didn't finish the race. A coolant fault forced him out. Isaac Hadjar limped home, finishing 8th, but 87 seconds behind the leader. In Formula One, that's not a gap. That's a different race. And inside the garage, the problems were stacking up. Handling issues, reliability failures, a car that just didn't respond. Laurent Mekies didn't hide from it either. He admitted exactly how bad the situation was. Being on the back foot at the start of a sprint weekend is the worst possible scenario, as there is really little time to catch up and get on top of any difficulties. And then came the deeper truth, the one that explains why Red Bull even ended up here in the first place. We knew that just getting onto the grid in Melbourne with our own power unit was a major achievement in itself. And it would have been naive not to expect we would encounter reliability issues. Think about that for a second. Red Bull, the team that dominated entire seasons, is now admitting they expected problems just to show up. And it didn't stop there. We had to retire Max because of a coolant fault. However, this was not our only issue, as overall performance-wise, our package showed some significant shortcomings. That's not the language of a team fighting for a title. That's the language of a team trying to survive. But here's where things start to get strange. Because while the results say crisis, Red Bull says opportunity. However, we have learned so much over the past few weeks, and I expect that we can be more competitive from the next round in Japan in a fortnight's time. More competitive. Japan, Suzuka, that's not a vague promise. That's a target. And suddenly, the narrative flips. Because while Red Bull was struggling on track, something else was happening behind the scenes. Something far more damaging than a coolant leak. Not just a little bit either. A lot. Leaked data from China suggests the RB22 is massively overweight. Not by a few kilograms. Not by a small margin. By around 62.8 pounds over the minimum. That's not just heavy. That's catastrophic. In Formula One, every extra pound costs lap time. And in this case, nearly a full second per lap. 1 second every lap. That's the difference between pole position and the midfield. While Mercedes is almost perfectly on the weight limit, barely losing any time at all, Red Bull is bleeding performance before the race even starts. And suddenly, everything makes sense. The slow corners, the tire wear, the lack of pace, the frustration. Even Verstappen couldn't hide it. On team radio, he called the car horrendous. Not difficult, not tricky, horrendous. Because no matter how talented you are, no matter how aggressive you drive, you cannot fight physics. A heavier car means slower acceleration, longer braking, more stress on the tires, less grip through corners. And Red Bull, they have all of it. Pierre Wache admitted it too. Challenges with the weight. It's the case for everybody. Maybe some people did a better job than us, but on our side, we will have to find some weight on the car. That line hits differently when you realize what it means. They didn't just miss the target, they missed it badly. And now, every second they spend fixing weight is time they're not spending getting faster. So the question becomes, how do you catch Mercedes when you're already 1 second behind before the lap even begins? Well, Red Bull thinks they have an answer. Because despite everything, the failures, the leaks, the criticism, they are not backing down. I'm not sure if worried is the right word, Mickey said. It's large, no question. It didn't really come as a surprise. Not a surprise. Let that sink in. They expected this. We were expecting them to be very, very strong as the preseason test built up. So, not a surprise that it's large. And then comes the line that changes everything. On the other hand, we expect the season to be very long. This isn't panic. This is patience. And maybe, just maybe, something bigger is coming. And that's where the real story begins. Because Red Bull isn't just talking about survival anymore. They're talking about a fight, a long one, a difficult one. And maybe the most dangerous kind, the kind where nothing is fixed overnight, but everything changes when it finally clicks. Red Bull sees data, lessons, direction, They see a car that can be fixed. We have a great group of talented people on the campus, and I have full confidence that we will get through our current limitations thanks to a massive push from everyone and improve our package rapidly. Rapidly. That word matters. Because in Formula One, rapid development can flip an entire season in weeks. And now, all eyes are on Suzuka. Not just another race, not just another weekend. A test. Suzuka is unforgiving. High-speed corners, tight technical sections, a track that exposes every weakness in a car's balance and aero. If the RB22 is still broken, it will show. But if Red Bull has found something, anything, we'll see it immediately. And here's where things get even more interesting. Because while Red Bull is chasing answers, Mercedes is already delivering results. 2 races, 2 dominant 1-2s. They're not just leading. They're controlling the pace of the entire championship. And Ferrari, close enough to fight, fast enough to pressure. Which means Red Bull isn't just catching one team. They're chasing 2. And both of them are improving at the same time. So again, how do you close a 1-second gap when your rivals are still getting faster? You don't do it by playing safe. You do it by taking risks. And Red Bull has already made one of the biggest gambles on the grid, building their own power unit, a completely new system, a completely new philosophy. And now we're seeing the cost of that decision, but also the potential, because insiders are starting to whisper something very interesting. That underneath the weight, underneath the issues, the RB22 might actually be quick. That the aero platform, the power delivery, the concept itself might not be broken at all. It's just buried, hidden under extra mass, masked by inefficiencies, choked by problems that, in theory, can be solved. And if that's true, then Mercedes and Ferrari aren't just watching a struggling team. They're watching a ticking clock, because the moment Red Bull strips that weight down, the moment the car starts breathing properly, everything changes. Suddenly, that 1-second deficit disappears. Suddenly, Verstappen isn't fighting the car. He's unleashing it. And we've seen what happens when that combination clicks. It's not close. It's domination. But there's still a catch. Time. Because Formula One doesn't wait. Development windows close, upgrades fail, rivals adapt. And every race Red Bull spins fixing problems is a race Mercedes spins building an even bigger lead. That's the real danger. Not that Red Bull can't fix the RB22, but that by the time they do, it might already be too late. And yet, they're still calm, still composed, still talking like a team that knows something the rest of us don't. We will improve. Simple words. No drama, no excuses. Just a statement and maybe a warning. Because if Suzuka shows even the smallest step forward, if the upgrades work, if the weight starts to drop, then this entire narrative flips overnight, from crisis to comeback. From weakness to threat. So now the question isn't whether Red Bull is struggling. We've seen that. The question is, are Mercedes and Ferrari already too far ahead? Or are they about to be blindsided by a team that's been quietly rebuilding itself in the shadows? Because if Red Bull is telling the truth, then Japan won't just be another race. It'll be the moment everything starts to change.